Welcome back, Wargamers, and today we're taking tales from the mighty Fyreslayers, exploring the trials and tribulations of Grimnir's finest, and bringing a moment from their epic history onto the tabletop. And I wanted to talk about the Pyre War, a small lore bit from the Fyreslayer battle tome, and it goes like this. The Skaven prove most adept at penetrating magma holds. Most invasions are halted, but several lesser lodges are destroyed in the fighting. During these fierce campaigns, the Ratman discovers something of the power of Urgold. Although not as precious to them as, say, Warpstone, the Skaven begin to consume the Duardin dead, Urgold runes and all, in the hopes of imbuing themselves with the empowering energies. The Fyreslayers ensure that funeral pyres are constructed as soon as possible in the wake of any conflict to prevent this heinous desecration. Alright, so there's a lot to unpack here on the surface, more so than it might seem initially. Let's talk about Urgold. If you're not familiar with this idea, Urgold is a metal that looks like gold outwardly, like you can't tell the difference, but is actually imbued with the power of the Fyreslayer's god, Grimnir. Way back in the Age of Myth, Grimnir was seeking a mighty challenge, and picked a fight with Volcatrix, the mother of all salamanders. I went in more detail about why they actually went into a fight in the Fyreslayers lore week, so go check that out. But Grimnir and Volcatrix battled for days, leveling mountains, thrashing oceans, all that kind of stuff, until they both delivered a fatal blow to one another pretty much at the same time. In that moment, the Duardin god exploded. But, as a deity, he can't really be destroyed in the traditional sense, and so his essence, what makes him him, was fired out across the mortal realms in this strange form of metal, Urgold. Now, Fyreslayers can sense Urgold from regular gold. They look similar outwardly to everybody else, but they understand themselves. They can sense the power of their god. And over time, they've not only built it into a part of their mythos, but religion and war and societal structure. It's all about Urgold. The hunt for Urgold to reconstruct their missing deity is the primary goal of all Fyreslayers. But along the way to doing this, they discovered something pretty interesting. By crafting this gold into weapons and trinkets and runes, and then if you either wield them or you put them in your skin, it grants the Fyreslayer a tiny amount of their god's power and fury. This is the secret of the Fyreslayers. They can supercharge their bodies with these runes when needed, expending the godlike energy within and gifting them with extraordinary power in battle. When this power is expended, because again it is limited as a resource, the Urgold sort of becomes inert. And so it's the ultimate goal to find all the Urgold within the realms, expend its energy, doing mighty deeds that would make Grimnir proud, and by releasing that energy, pave the way for his return. Now, I started with Urgold because, honestly, I think it actually is the main character in this story. Yes, it's about rats and dwarves, Skaven and Duardin, but really, it's the value and significance of Urgold that's on the line here. This one physical material is the Fyreslayers' sole religious connection, how they measure their worth, what they spend their lives seeking and preserving. In short, it represents a massive amount of Fyreslayer values and worldview. They're so connected to this one resource. So keep that in mind when all of a sudden you see other races eating it, or in any way using Urgold energy. It is like the ultimate affront to their values. It'll enrage any Fyreslayer to the core in a way that no other taunt or insult could, because this material is their whole purpose in this world. But with the stakes set, let's talk more about the actual story. And this one is unique to the lore bits we've covered before because it's not really about a single event, but a sweeping problem across all Fyreslayer holds. Skaven and Duardin have been bitter enemies since time immemorial. So let's explore both just a bit here and try to create armies and a scenario that can reflect the ingenious and mad Skaven trying to invade and annihilate a Fyreslayer magma hold. And we'll kick it off with the Fyreslayers. Yeah, it's their book after all, it's their story. This is a patriarchal society that is based from the ground up to find Urgold and use it in battle. A magma hold is a term for any given Fyreslayer fortress. These are largely underground facilities that use natural formations and lava flows to create near impenetrable defenses. With a magma hold, there are maybe dozens or hundreds of Duardin families within it living in community and trying to carve out a home within the mortal realms. They sell their services off as warriors, acting as the main form of income for each magma hold. And they kind of have a range of customer bases depending on, we'll say, the morality of the Runefather in charge. Some are more dubious and they're happy to work with Chaos factions as straight mercenaries, even though they don't like it. However, others are a little bit more on the, we'll say, Order side and only want to assist the Pantheon or the Greater Grand Alliance of Order. Again, I can't stress enough, even though it might seem like a huge break from traditional dwarves from the old world, the Duardin Age of Sigmar, the Fyreslayers specifically, there's that primary mission of reconstructing Grimnir, and they will do anything that they can, emphasis on anything, to achieve it. Now, we don't have a lot of physical detail to a magma hold, which is notable because it's the place where these stories are going down, but there's a bit we do know about them. As said before, these are massive cities that are built underground or into a mountain or volcano, and so that's the kind of environment that we're going to be talking about, right? Largely dark, possibly claustrophobic, although dwarves do have these big, chambers within mountains and that kind of stuff. Lots of lava, rocks, that kind of thing. Within each magma hold, you have a few locations that you might want to use as the battleground for your fight. For example, each of them has a massive forge, and that cannot be overstated. A place where Urgold is forged into runes of power and weapons and made into religious iconography and all these things. They really revere the forge as a place of power. There is also a vault. See, the key type weapon, when we look at the Runefather model and also in all the artwork, he's the patriarchal leader of the Fyreslayers, that thing he's carrying is the literal key to a vault that holds their magma holds Urgold. Which I imagine if you wanted a location to be the absolute last stand, they'd stop and they would defend this place to their last breath. So keep that in mind. Obviously, like I said, everything is about Urgold, so the last thing that you would ever do is let your enemies into your vault of it. Now, there would also be several shrines or temples to Grimnir scattered around because we have all these households of masons and craftsmen, and I think it's completely reasonable that we'd see several locations offering praise or worship to Grimnir. The Fyreslayers themselves are always at the ready to defend their homes. The Age of Chaos proved that even the hidden and fortified magma holds are no guarantee of safety in the mortal realms, and so they have vigilant defenders looking for holes, portals, gateways, weaknesses, whatever they can find. And that's about as detailed as we can really get because the story isn't really tied to a single lodge, meaning a single group of Fyreslayers, but rather all of them. This is a sweeping event that happened across the faction everywhere in the realms. And each Runefather will have their own kind of synchronicities that will pass onto their magma hold, so the size and shape and locations within are subject to change to an extent. Now, let's dig into some Skaven goodness. Yes. The Skaven are a Games Workshop race of rat men defined by a few things. Endless numbers of bodies, conniving personalities, where they each see themselves as the greatest thing ever, as if the Great Horned Rat, which is their deity, chose them specifically for greatness, and everyone else is just in the way, so it doesn't matter if they backstab or anything like that to get to the top, because it's where they belong. But you have billions of things that think this way. They're also defined by technology, and this is more an aesthetic thing with the models. The Skaven are incredibly crafty and ingenious in creating all manner of horrifying technology. And it could be literal machines when I say technology, like Clan Scryer, who does these huge, massive war machines and cannons and guns and all this crazy stuff, or it could be biological technology, like say Clan Mulder making living battering rams and huge monstrosities. Could also be something like chemical or bioweapon technology, which is kind of the heart and soul of Clan Pestilence, using poisons and stuff like that to just absolutely decimate their enemies. Each of these branches of thought have billions of Skaven pursuing them, from lowly slaves to high-ranking leaders. Each one of the trillions of Skaven in existence see themselves as the best and the brightest and will take any chance to backstab the person in charge to assume their, in their mind, rightful place. And I'll go more into Skaven society when we cover a lore bit from their book, but what's important for this story is that they have the means to get into magma holds like no one else. You see, they have these inventions like gnaw holes, allowing them to bore through reality itself, huge drills to cut through rock, acids to turn minerals into liquid, and hulking beasts to move boulders and obstacles. So there really isn't a wonder as to why, these little vermin are the bane of the Fyreslayer world. They just have an inordinate number of ways to get into the magma hold. Specifically though, this story has to do with a wide-ranging assault on magma holds, which are broadly given one term: the Pyre War. And I can easily see a huge Grand Alliance Chaos armies, basically in the Age of Chaos, walking up to a magma hold, seeing how hard it is to get in there, and some warlord delegates its eradication to a Skaven warlord. And at least during the Age of Chaos, when, Chaos armies were just meandering around whatever they wanted to do. Because the other factions within Grand Alliance Chaos that might be working together don't have the necessary equipment or manpower, and we don't really like the Skaven, so just throw the rats at them. Now, at some point in these battles, the Skaven learned something they were never meant to, and that is that Urgold is a closely kept secret of the Fyreslayers, because they don't want people to know that there's a secondary mission behind everything they do. So, to feed this many rats as they're doing these huge attacks, they will often eat the weak or the dead, both amongst themselves and, of course, their enemy. And so they started to feast on their victims, only to find that eating the ones with, weird gold stuff sticking out of them gave them a little bit of a boost. Now, I can't say it supercharges Skaven as much as it does Fyreslayers. It says really clearly they still prefer warpstone, so I'm not sure what the comparison is as far as what it does to the body, but it's enough of a boost to make it a priority in killing, and enough for the Fyreslayers to be horrified at the prospect. Eating your neighbor is bad enough. Again, these are family-based communities of magma holds, of families that have been linked together for centuries, so that's already one huge emotional toll. But eating him and desecrating a piece of your god and crapping them both out is probably the highest insult that one can offer. Overall, I love this kind of story, and it seems like prime ground for a campaign, right? You have an attacker, you have a defender. The different games could be the defender getting pushed back and back further. Not to mention the Duardin versus Skaven fight is just epic and frankly timeless, right? The forces at play are so interesting. Elite, honorable, and family-based Fyreslayers seeking a holy mission to reconstitute their god through an endless hunt. And on the flip side, the Skaven being duplicitous and backstabbing, no regard for family or kin, seeking simply dominance and the destruction of all enemies. And so now that we've set the stage for this conflict and talked a bit about why it's so cool, let's explore bringing it to the tabletop, starting with the armies. Honestly, this is the most wide open piece of lore we've covered so far, right? This bit represents any and all Fyreslayer lodges, as well as any force of Skaven that want to get into the magma hold for several reasons. You can really have any combination of units, sub-factions, but here's a few things to keep in mind when you're doing your list building. The Runefather would want to be the one at the head of his defenses. Yes, it is true that the Skaven could be attacking while he is out, but the idea of having the head of the lodge, the father and ruler at the forefront, is so epic, it's so Duardin-y, you know what I mean? Just having that leader at the forefront, the patriarch of the magma hold right there in the front. Beyond that, kinda just take whatever you want. Of course, the Rune sons, his children, the Rune father, would be there trying to put on huge displays of epic grandeur and battle prowess and leadership, because they ultimately are in competition with one another to become the next Rune father. So keep that in mind. Like, there's just some stuff that naturally, if a magma hold was on the brink of destruction, its leadership would be there, represented, ready to fight. Now, as for the Skaven, when you build your list, try to remember what their goal is. And this is one where I can't really give you a detailed thing. I would say really think about what kind of army you want to bring to the table, like what the backstory is for your Skaven, and how would they get into a magma hold, right? So any smart Skaven warlord or Greyseer would hire all manner of clans to achieve this. All the clans work together, they sell and trade services. Maybe they hire Clan Scryer to bring some Storm Fiends so they can drill in to the magma hold. They could also hire Clan Molder using brute force and a hell pit abominations to tear rocks apart and just dig like rats do. The point is, think about how your armies would enter the magma hold, right? Because that's the force that's going there. They have to puncture in. And keeping their ability to enter the magma hold is just one part, because once you're in, you need bodies to take it. And so thinking of forces that will overrun the hold are also important. Now, if you are doing this as a campaign thing, I could really see a really cool campaign where the Fyreslayer player is using a consistent army, like this, generally speaking, the same troops and that kind of thing in general. But the Skaven player has, a force meant to burrow initially into the magma hold, and then maybe in the next battle round, okay, the drill guys have gone off to the side, and now it's the flood of rats. And so each mission, if you are doing a campaign, can reflect different parts of the Skaven army doing their specific role. I guess what I'm thinking of, it's kind of a mixed army and a big bag of stuff to get into, right? You have masses to swarm the Fyreslayer force once you get in there. And so making a backstory for your warlord and taking whatever support heroes you want and how they would achieve that is really important. However, with the armies chosen, let's talk battle plans. Now, I want to be clear at the front here that this blurb represents holds all across the realms. Some holds survive, others fall. It's up to you. Not only that, but the means of attack can vary as well. The point is, I can't make one battle plan to represent all these different wars. I just can't, all right? So I'm going to pick one and just kind of walk through what I think is cool about it, but I encourage you to go over to the Open War Generator and just create some of your own. And I'm always advocating keeping things simple. And if you're like me, you are looking for existing battle plans that we can modify or build on. It's just nice to have something in print for everyone to reference. And it's super convenient that in the Fyreslayer Battle Tome, there's a really good one. I'll throw it up on the screen here, but it's a Fyreslayer army defending a gateway into a city, which we can modify for our story, which could just as easily be them defending the door to their Gold vault, or some chamber within the magma hold. Maybe they're being pushed backwards or something like that. And what's cool about this is every Fyreslayer hero gets an artifact, right? Because if the enemy has destroyed enough of the magma hold to be at the gates of their Gold reserves, they are not going to hold anything back. This is a die or do situation, and they need to get the Skaven out of there. In addition to that, there's also like a weather mechanic that gives small debuffs to the invader, which can be re-rolled. So if the Skaven player doesn't want to have to suffer those effects, but every time they re-roll it, the Fyreslayer player gets an extra command point, which is an interesting idea. So kind of have a look at that. It's a very cool thing. If you have a Fyreslayer book, crack it open and take a good look at it. Now, another thing you might want to consider that I do highly recommend is the Battle for Elixia campaign system that came out in the General's Handbook 2019. In it, there's a depiction of a Stormcast Eternal army basically fighting to keep a city safe, and it's a small 3-mission campaign meant to be fast and brutal. The narrative is super easy to adopt for our story today, as magma holds are, essentially the cities of the Fyreslayers, right? And there's not a massive difference there, and this mini campaign is of them getting pushed back, making desperate defenses and trying to survive. And these missions tend to be more symmetrical in their deployment, which might honestly help with some of the more, I'll say the less narrative players to kind of get in. For some reason, folks who don't normally play narrative gaming, when they see a asymmetrical mission, it kind of just puts a bad taste in their mouth, but symmetrical ones where they can really study the mission and understand how to achieve victory. That's something that really appeals to many players. And of course, like I said, you can make your own mission with the Open War Generator, which opens up hundreds of combinations if you have the 3 latest general handbooks. And while I'm not going to attempt to go over all of the cool combinations, here are a few bolt-on rules from General's Handbook 2018 that might add a little bit of, narrative flavor. If you are doing a survival mission, meaning the Fyreslayer player has to, stay on the board for 5 turns or something like that, you could do sustained attack. Each time a unit, other than a hero or monster, is destroyed, place it to one side, and at the end of any of their following movement phases, the controlling player can roll a dice for each unit that has been placed to the side in this manner. On a 3-up, the unit being rolled for can be set up as a new unit anywhere wholly within their territory, wholly within 9 inches of their edge of the battlefield, and more than 9 inches from enemy models. And so this would be like the endless waves of Skaven keep coming, and the Fyreslayers have to survive. Of course, you can make that one-sided, meaning only the Skaven player keeps regenerating, or you can do both sides, meaning the Fyreslayer reinforcements are trickling into the gate as well. There's also Tunnel Network. All terrain features have the Labyrinthian Tunnels scenery rule, see below, in addition to anything else they have. And what that rule basically is if a unit is wholly within 6 inches of a terrain feature with that rule, at the start of your movement phase, you can remove the unit from the battlefield and set it up wholly within 6 inches of another terrain feature with that rule outside 9 inches of the enemy. So basically, all the terrain features let you essentially teleport around to one another, and so this could be really used to affect or effectively to represent the caves and the tunnels of burrowing deep, either through the Skaven way, like of just literally burrowing through things, or just that the magma hold has all these little hidden networks and doors. And lastly, we have night fighting. Roll 4d6 at the start of each battle round to see how much light there is. The roll is the maximum distance in inches that models can see that round. Attacks, spells, and abilities that require one or more models to be visible to another cannot be made beyond this range. So, if you wanted to, honestly, if I was defending a magma hold, using darkness is just one more tool that you have an advantage to. Like, you can turn out the lights on your enemy, get in there, and be mean to them. And so that's one that if you wanted to simulate that, that's a rule that exists, and I think it's kind of cool, especially because this is one that it is a blanket statement rule that affects both sides, but honestly, it's probably going to hurt the Skaven way more. Like, it's a defender's oriented thing. Simply because Fyreslayers don't have nearly that much ranged stuff in their faction, whereas with the Skaven, they have quite a bit. They have, Jezzails and the warplaning cannons and all that stuff. And all of these can be used in conjunction with Open War Generator stuff to make a compelling narrative, or of course you can always bolt these on to existing battle plans. That's the whole point of these small little rules that they put out. Now, as for general advice on making this battle plan from scratch or modifying one that exists, remember, it's a great way to tell a story by using deployment, right? The Fyreslayers defending something or some place just fits right in. This extends to the placement of gnaw holes and the magmic forge. Not every specific mission may use them thematically. Just walk through the story you want to tell with your opponent and your friend and agree on what would make sense in this particular narrative you guys are trying to do. And so, friends, I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know your thoughts down below. How would you recreate the epic siege of a magma hold? Because it's supposed to be this colossal structure that is made to have all kinds of traps and defenses and that kind of thing. It would probably be a very epic fight. In fact, I would love to see a Wrath of the Everchosen, like a short, contained campaign narrative that was either a city under siege or something like that, where we can modify rules to create this kind of thing. I would love to see it. I really would like to see straight up a Fyreslayer versus Skaven or Gloomspite gets all, their traditional enemies they had in the old world, and explore that in more detail. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.